When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. Even now, when I think about that moment, I still do not fully understand why I smiled. It was not happiness. It was not strength. It was something quiet and strange, like my heart had stepped back and let my face take control. Inside me, everything felt loose, like a thread had snapped, and nothing was holding things together anymore. The house was very quiet that afternoon, too quiet. No sound from the television, no radio playing in the background, no clatter from the kitchen, just the ticking of the wall clock and the soft sound of my own breathing. Each tick felt loud, like it was counting something I could not stop. I stood near the front door with a small cloth bag in my hand. It was not packed properly. There was no plan. Inside it were a few clothes, my daily medicines, and an old photograph of my husband. The photo was folded at the corner, worn from being touched too many times. I did not take anything else, not because I did not want to, but because I did not know what I was allowed to take from a life that no longer felt like mine. She stood a few steps away from me. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. That gentleness hurt more than anger would have. She said it was better this way. She said the house needed peace. She said space would help everyone. Then she looked at me and said, "You will understand." Those words stayed with me. You will understand. As if understanding was a duty I owed her. As if pain becomes easier when it is explained softly. I looked toward my son, waiting for something. A word, a movement, a look, anything. He was sitting on the sofa, his shoulders slightly bent, his hands locked together. His eyes stayed on the floor, like the tiles were suddenly very interesting. He did not speak, he did not look up. That silence broke something inside me. I nodded my head slowly. I smiled, even though my lips felt heavy. I did not ask where I would go. I did not ask how long this was supposed to be. I did not ask why. I picked up my bag and stepped outside. The door closed behind me with a soft sound. It did not slam. It did not creak. It closed gently, like it was trying not to hurt me. That sound followed me for days. Sometimes at night, I would hear it again in my mind, closing over and over. I stood outside for a moment, looking at the door. This door I had opened thousands of times. This door I had cleaned, painted, and protected from dust and rain. Now it felt like it belonged to someone else. As I walked away, my legs felt weak. My steps were slow, but I did not stop. I did not turn back. I was afraid that if I did, I would fall apart right there on the street. That night, I stayed at my sister's house. She prepared the bed for me without asking questions. She did not push. She just looked at my face and understood that some stories need time before they can be told. I lay down, staring at the ceiling. The fan moved slowly above me, making a low, steady sound. Sleep did not come. My mind was too full. Memories came instead. I remembered the day my son was born. I remembered holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine. I remembered the fear and joy mixed together in my chest. I remembered promising myself that I would always protect him. I remembered the day he got married, how proud I felt, how nervous, how hopeful. I remembered standing in the kitchen that night, tired but happy, thinking that life was changing but still whole. Somewhere along the way, something had slipped out of place. I tried to find the moment when everything went wrong. I searched my mind like someone searching for a lost key, checking the same places again and again, hoping it would suddenly appear. Was it something I said? Was it something I did not say? Was it a look, a tone, a silence? I could not find the answer that night. The next morning I woke up early. My sister was already in the kitchen making tea. She placed a cup in front of me without speaking. I held it with both hands, feeling the warmth travel into my fingers. "Stay as long as you need," she said softly.
I nodded. Words felt heavy, like if I spoke they would fall apart before reaching her ears. Days passed, slowly, quietly. I settled into a routine that did not feel like mine. I folded my clothes neatly and placed them in a small corner. I took my medicines on time. I helped in the kitchen when I could. I tried not to be a burden. At night, when everyone slept, I allowed myself to feel things. Loneliness has a sound. It is not loud. It is not sharp. It is a low, steady feeling that sits in your chest and reminds you that something is missing. I felt it every night. Sometimes I wondered if my son missed me, if he noticed my empty chair at the table, if he ever reached for his phone and then stopped. I did not call him. Pride held me back. Fear did too. I was afraid of hearing distance in his voice. Weeks turned into months. People asked questions, neighbors, relatives. I gave simple answers. It's easier this way. They need space. I'm fine. I became very good at saying I'm fine. One afternoon, as I sat by the window watching children play in the street, a thought came to me, quiet but heavy. This did not happen in one day. And that thought stayed with me. I began to look back further, not just at the last few weeks, but years, small moments I had ignored, feelings I had pushed aside, times I had chosen silence instead of conversation. I remembered how, after my husband passed away, the house felt different, how grief changed the air, how everyone moved carefully around each other. I remembered how decisions started being made without me, how meals were planned without asking what I wanted, how conversations stopped when I entered the room. At the time, I told myself it was normal, that young couples need freedom, that a mother should step back. I believed silence was respect. Now, sitting alone by the window, I wondered if silence had been a mistake. I wondered how long things had been misunderstood, how long someone had been believing something that was never true. That thought scared me, because if something had been broken for years, fixing it would not be easy. That night, I took out my husband's photograph from my bag. I ran my fingers over his face in the picture. He was smiling, the way he always did, calm and sure. "I don't understand," I whispered. The room did not answer, but somewhere deep inside me, a quiet feeling began to form, a feeling that this was not the end of the story, that something had been hidden, that one day the truth would have to come out. I did not know then that it had been hidden for 15 years. I did not know that one day she would sit across from me and finally look me in the eyes. For now, all I knew was this. I had left my house with a smile on my face and 1,000 questions in my heart.
Before the silence, before the distance, before the quiet pain that slowly grew inside that house, there was a time when everything felt warm and full. I remember it clearly. The house did not always feel heavy. Once it felt alive. It breathed with us. It held our laughter in its walls and our worries in its corners. Back then, I never imagined that one day I would leave it with a small bag and a forced smile. My husband and I were simple people. We did not have big dreams or grand plans. We believed in hard work, honesty, and family. We saved money slowly, cutting small joys so we could build something lasting. When we finally built that house, brick by brick, it felt like we were planting roots. Every room had a purpose. The kitchen was where stories were shared. The living room was where evenings passed quietly. The small courtyard was where we sat on warm nights, talking about nothing and everything. And at the center of all of it was our son. We waited years for him. When he was born, I felt like the world had finally softened. I held him in my arms and felt a love so deep it frightened me. From that day, my life began to move around his needs, his fears, his dreams. My husband often said, "Do not hold him too tight. He must breathe." But love makes you forget such wisdom. As he grew, we tried to give him everything we never had: education, comfort, safety.
Maybe we gave too much. Maybe we forgot to teach him how to handle distance and conflict. I do not know. When he told us he wanted to marry, my heart felt many things at once: pride, fear, joy, loss. A mother knows that marriage means sharing her child, not owning him anymore. When I first met her, I studied her quietly, not to judge, but to understand. She was younger than I expected, quiet, careful with her words. Her eyes held a kind of alertness, like someone who had learned early to protect herself. I told myself to be kind, to be patient. On the first day she came to our house as a bride, I welcomed her with warmth. I helped her unpack. I showed her where things were kept. I told her gently that this was her home now. I meant it. In those early months, we tried. All of us did. We ate meals together. Sometimes we talked late into the night. Sometimes we laughed at small, silly things. I watched my son change. I saw him become softer, more thoughtful. I liked the way he looked at her, like she was something precious. I did not feel jealous. I felt relieved. I believed our family had grown, not broken. There were small misunderstandings, of course. That is normal when different lives come together. Sometimes she wanted things done differently. Sometimes I held on to old habits. But we handled it quietly, or at least I thought we did. Looking back now, I wonder how much went unsaid. Then my husband became ill. Illness has a way of changing everything without asking permission. Slowly, the house became quieter. The laughter faded. The future became uncertain. We moved through our days carefully, like stepping on fragile ground. My husband grew weaker. He spoke less. Some nights I stayed awake beside him, listening to his breathing, afraid of the silence between each breath. During that time, my son and his wife took on more responsibility. They helped. They tried. But grief works differently on everyone. When my husband passed away, the house lost its anchor. I lost my partner, my friend, the person who balanced me. After his death, I felt like a shadow of myself. I moved through the house, doing what needed to be done, but without purpose. I smiled when I needed to. I spoke when spoken to. Inside, I was empty. And slowly, things began to change. Not in loud ways, in small, quiet ones. Meals were no longer shared regularly. Sometimes they ate earlier, sometimes later. I told myself they were busy. Decisions were made without my knowledge. New furniture, new routines. I found out after everything was already done. My opinions were no longer asked, not because they were rejected, but because they were forgotten. At first, I blamed myself. I thought maybe I had become invisible because I was quiet, because I did not insist, because I believed that giving space was the same as giving respect. I stayed out of the way. I cleaned the house carefully, making sure not to disturb anyone. I cooked food and left it quietly in the kitchen. I spent more time alone in my room. Sometimes I noticed her watching me, not with anger, with something else, something guarded. I wanted to ask her if something was wrong, but I did not. I believed that time would fix things, that patience was the answer, that silence would protect peace. My husband grew more distant. He was not unkind, he was just busy, always tired, always carrying the weight of work and responsibility. I missed him even when he was in the same house. Some nights I sat in the courtyard alone, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood, other families, other lives. I wondered if they were happier than us or just better at hiding their cracks. I often thought about speaking to my son, sitting him down, asking him if everything was all right, but something held me back. Fear. Fear of becoming a problem. Fear of being told I was imagining things. Fear of hearing that I was no longer needed. So I stayed quiet. Days turned into months, months into years. Without realizing it, I had started shrinking my own place in the family. I told myself that this was what good mothers do. They step aside, they make room, they do not interfere. What I did not realize was that while I was stepping back, a misunderstanding was growing, a belief was forming, a story was being told in someone else's heart without my voice in it. If I had known that then, I might have spoken, but I did not know. All I knew was that the house, once full of life, was slowly becoming a place where I no longer felt seen. And this was only the beginning.
Distance does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, dressed as normal life. After my husband's passing, days continued to move forward, even though something inside me had stopped. The house still stood, meals were still cooked, doors were still opened and closed. From the outside, everything looked fine. But inside, something was slowly pulling away. At first, I thought it was grief. I told myself that everyone handles loss differently, that my daughter-in-law needed time, that my son was under pressure, that I should not take things personally. So I stayed patient. I lowered my voice. I softened my steps. I learned how to exist without being noticed. In the mornings, I woke up before everyone else. I made my tea quietly and sat near the window. I watched the street come to life. Children walking to school, shopkeepers opening their shutters, life moving forward, whether I felt ready or not. When my son and his wife woke up, I was already out of the way. At first, I thought this was kindness. Later, I realized it was fear. Fear of disturbing their peace. Fear of being seen as a burden. Fear of being unwanted. My daughter-in-law remained polite. She spoke to me when needed. She never raised her voice. She never insulted me. On the surface, there was nothing wrong, but warmth was gone. Her smiles did not reach her eyes. Her words felt measured, like each one was chosen carefully. She avoided long conversations. She avoided being alone with me. Sometimes I caught her watching me from a distance, her face unreadable, as if she was trying to decide something she had already decided long ago. I tried to remember when this change had started. Was it after my husband's death? Was it before that? Had I missed the signs because I was too busy being careful? My son changed too. He spoke less. When he did, his answers were short. He was always tired, always thinking about something else. When I tried to talk about small things, he nodded without really listening. I missed the sound of his voice, the way he used to sit beside me and talk about his day. Now, even when we were in the same room, he felt far away. There were moments when I wanted to stop everything and ask, "What is wrong?" But the words never came out. I was afraid of the answer. One evening, something happened that stayed with me for years. I was passing by their room when I heard my name. The door was closed. Their voices were low. I was not trying to listen. I was not standing there on purpose. But my name caught my attention, and my feet stopped on their own. Her voice was sharp, not loud but tight. His voice was tired, defensive. I did not hear everything. I did not need to. The tone told me enough. I walked away quietly, my heart pounding. I sat on my bed and stared at my hands, wondering how long they had been talking about me without me knowing. From that day on, I felt different, like I was standing on thin ice. I began to question every small thing I did. If I spoke too much, I worried I was interfering. If I stayed silent, I worried I looked cold. If I helped, I worried I was overstepping. If I did nothing, I worried I seemed lazy. I could not win. So I chose to disappear.
I stopped offering opinions. I stopped asking questions. I stopped sharing my feelings. I made myself smaller in every way I could. Years passed like this. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. 15 years of quiet distance. From the outside, people thought we were a peaceful family. No fights, no drama, no loud arguments. They didn't see the empty spaces. They didn't see me eating alone most nights. They didn't see me sitting by the window watching the world pass. They didn't see how carefully I planned my movements to avoid conflict. I aged quietly during those years. My hair turned gray, my body slowed down, my world became smaller. Sometimes relatives would visit. They would ask why I was so quiet. I smiled and said I was just tired. It was easier than explaining loneliness. On special occasions, like birthdays or holidays, we came together. We smiled for pictures, we sat at the same table, but something was always missing: connection. I watched my son from across the room, wondering if he still saw me as his mother or just someone who lived in the same house. There were moments of hope, small ones. Sometimes she would bring me tea without being asked. Sometimes my son would sit beside me for a few minutes and ask how I was feeling. Those moments felt precious, like drops of rain in a dry season. They kept me going. They made me believe that maybe things were not as bad as I felt. But the distance always returned. One night I couldn't sleep. My body was tired, but my mind would not rest. I sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the house, the ticking clock, the distant noise of traffic. I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. What if this is not just grief? What if something else had taken root in our family? The thought scared me, because if something had been misunderstood, it meant all this pain could have been avoided. I thought about speaking to my daughter-in-law, sitting with her, asking her honestly if I had hurt her, but fear stopped me again. Fear of rejection, fear of hearing that I was the problem, fear of breaking the fragile peace we had had. So I stayed quiet. I chose patience over honesty. I did not realize that patience, when mixed with silence, can turn into suffering. The years continued to pass, and then, one day, without warning, the quiet distance turned into separation. The day she asked me to leave. That day did not come suddenly. It had been building for 15 long years, and I had been standing in the middle of it, silent, waiting for something to change.
Months passed after I left the house. Life became smaller, quieter. I learned how to live with less space, less noise, less expectation. My sister never made me feel unwanted, but I could feel the difference between being welcomed and truly belonging. I spent a lot of time alone. I sat near the window most days, watching people pass by. Some walked quickly, like they had places to go. Some walked slowly, like they were carrying something heavy. I wondered which one I looked like. I thought about my son often. Sometimes I imagined him standing in the doorway of his room, looking at the empty space where my slippers used to be. Sometimes I imagined him reaching for his phone, then stopping. I did not know if these thoughts were real or just hope trying to comfort me. I did not call him. He did not call me. Silence stretched between us like a long road no one wanted to walk on. One afternoon, my sister told me someone was at the door. When I stepped into the living room and saw her standing there, my heart tightened. My daughter-in-law. She looked different. Not angry, not proud, just tired. Her shoulders were slightly bent. Her face looked pale. Her eyes did not move around the room like before. They stayed low, as if they were afraid of meeting mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then my sister quietly left us alone. We sat across from each other. The room felt heavy, like the air was waiting. She held her hands together tightly. I noticed they were shaking. "I need to talk to you," she said. Her voice was soft, careful. I nodded. She took a deep breath, then another. It felt like she was gathering courage that had been missing for a long time. "I can't keep this inside anymore," she said. "I have been carrying it for too many years." After that day, nothing changed all at once, and somehow that was a relief. There was no sudden happiness, no dramatic reunion, no promises spoken loudly, just a quiet understanding that something important had finally been said, something that had been buried for 15 years had come into the light, and now it needed time to breathe. When my daughter-in-law left that evening, she did not rush out. She stood at the door for a moment, as if she wanted to say more but did not know how. Then she turned back to me. "I don't expect you to forgive me quickly," she said. "I just couldn't keep lying anymore." I nodded. Forgiveness is not something you give all at once. It is something you walk toward slowly, step by step. That night, after she left, I sat alone for a long time. The room felt different, lighter somehow. Not happy, but honest. I held my husband's photograph in my hands and spoke softly, as if he could hear me. "They finally spoke," I whispered. "All these years, they finally spoke." For the first time in a long while, I slept without my thoughts racing ahead of me. In the days that followed, my son called. His voice sounded unsure, like he did not know which version of himself to bring into the conversation. "Ummi?" he said quietly. That one word carried so much weight. We talked slowly, carefully. He did not defend himself. He did not explain too much. He simply said he was sorry. Not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly. "I should have spoken sooner," he said. "I thought staying quiet would keep peace." I closed my eyes when he said that. Silence again. The same mistake repeated by all of us. We did not talk long that day. We did not need to. Sometimes healing begins with short conversations that leave space for more later. Weeks passed. I did not return to the house immediately. I needed time, not to punish them, but to understand myself again. For so long, my life had been shaped around avoiding pain that I needed to learn how to live without fear. During those weeks, my daughter-in-law visited again. Not every day, not too often, just enough. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we sat quietly, sometimes she helped my sister in the kitchen, and sometimes she just watched me from the doorway, unsure of her place. I recognized that look. It was the same one I had worn for years. One afternoon, while we were folding clothes together, she spoke softly. "I thought you were strong," she said, "too strong to be hurt." I looked at her then. Strength doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you learn how to carry it quietly. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I wish I had asked you," she said. "So do I answered. Another silence settled between us, but this one felt different. It did not hurt. It rested. Slowly, trust began to rebuild itself, not because we forced it, but because we allowed it. A few months later, my son asked if I would come back home. He did not say it was my duty. He did not say it was expected. He asked, gently. "Only if you want to," he said. I thought about that question for a long time. That house had been the place where I lost myself, but it was also the place where my memories lived. My husband's laughter, my childhood son, my own life. I agreed, but on my terms. When I returned, I did not rush into old routines. I took my time. I unpacked slowly.
I placed my things where I wanted them, and I claimed my space without apology. The first night back, I slept in my old room. The walls felt familiar. The ceiling fan hummed softly. I lay awake for a while, listening to the house breathe around me. In the morning, my daughter-in-law knocked on my door. "Breakfast is ready," she said. Not politely, not formally, simply. I joined them. At the table, the three of us sat together. There was some awkwardness, some hesitation, but also effort, and effort matters. We spoke about small things, the weather, the news, a neighbor's wedding. No heavy talks, no past brought up. That came later. There were days when old habits returned, days when silence crept in again, days when misunderstandings tried to find their way back. But this time, we noticed. This time, we spoke. One evening, my daughter-in-law came to me and said, "I'm feeling uncomfortable about something." 15 years ago, those words would never have been spoken. We talked. We cleared it. The moment passed. I realized then that healing is not about never hurting again. It is about knowing how to stop the hurt from growing. Life did not become perfect, but it became real. I learned that forgiveness does not erase the past. It makes room for the future. I learned that silence can look like peace, but it often hides fear. And I learned that honesty, even when late, still has the power to heal. Now, when I sit in the courtyard in the evenings, I no longer feel invisible. Sometimes my son sits beside me. Sometimes my daughter-in-law brings tea and sits too. Sometimes we speak, sometimes we don't. But the silence is no longer heavy. It rests gently between us. If there is one thing I wish I had known earlier, it is this. Do not wait 15 years to speak your truth. Do not assume others know your heart. Do not carry pain quietly and call it strength. Families do not break only because of anger. They break because of unspoken fear. And sometimes all it takes to begin healing is one honest look into someone's eyes and the courage to finally speak.